Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming over to our session around aligning federal operations to get to outcomes faster and improve employee experience. My name is Pamela Graulich, and I'm a solution consultant manager for our public sector for the employee workflows line of business. And today we've got a nice fireside chat for you with three great speakers who we've been working with over the years. And so I'll let them introduce themselves. Bill, you want to start?
Good morning, I'm Bill Daniels. I'm the Acting Director of Application Development Digital Services in the Office of Secretary at the Department of Commerce.
Hi, I'm Liz Purcell. I'm the Director of Human Resources Information Systems at the Development Finance Corporation.
And my name's Steve Krauss. It's nice to see so many familiar and friendly faces in the audience. I work at the Office of Personnel Management, where I lead the HR Quality Services Management Office and the HR Line of Business Office.
Thanks. So having that role, Steve, starting already, having that role in your past experience, I know that gives you a different lens across looking at different HR systems and processes across the government. Can you talk to us a little bit about, what you're seeing and maybe what the data tells you?
Sure. So, I mentioned that I lead the HR QSMO and the HR Line of Business. And our primary role is we work across the agencies to help them modernize their HR IT ecosystems. And a big part of what we're trying to do from an OPM perspective and a government-wide perspective is to help agencies not just modernize, but to share what they're doing and to be able to share platforms, share processes, and so on. So to put that in context, the HR Line of Business Office at OPM works across the agencies to define standards that the agencies agree to converge on in terms of how they're going to manage human capital management functions. And the HR QSMO's job is to stand up a marketplace of sort of defined and vetted solutions that meet those standards and that can help agencies to operationalize those standards. So as you can tell, standards is a very important aspect of what we're doing and how we're doing it. We in effect are using the standards to work with agencies to define a common set of requirements when it comes to modernizing their systems and their processes. And we use those standards then with our industry partners to help them understand what it really means to federalize the products that they operate. Now, we do have a unique lens on this, as you pointed out, Pamela, because we have a bird's eye view of what's going on across the entire federal government. In fact, since 2022, we have executed an annual HR IT inventory where we work across all of the CFO Act agencies to understand what systems they're running, as well as what their modernization plans are. And so, first of all, what that tells us is there's a lot of modernization going on out there. There's a lot of modernization needs. And I think we'll get into that further as we talk here, yeah.
So you mentioned a little bit about, standardizing some of those processes and working with vendors to federalize things. We've been working together over the last, 9 to 12 months on what I'll call a side project to help government agencies get to those outcomes faster by having those standards or those elements that are needed. Can you talk a little bit about the project that we're working on and some insights around it?
Yeah, and you refer to it as a side project, but it's actually it's a really good example of what we're trying to do in the use of standards. It's a good example of standards in action. So one of the things that we found when we started talking about how to help agencies modernize and to kind of do it together is we realized, starting a few years ago, that a lot of agencies are using ServiceNow to modernize their HR workflows. In some cases, agencies are doing that so they can get more life out of some of their legacy systems, like PeopleSoft. 75% of civilian federal agencies run their HR. Their core HR is PeopleSoft as a system. In other cases, agencies are using ServiceNow to build and automate whole new HR workflows that didn't exist before. But there's a lot of use of ServiceNow, and the more that ServiceNow is being used in various agencies, the more that other agencies want to be able to use it. And so we started looking at this idea of, well, how could we help agencies share these workflows from one agency to another? Initially, our thought was, maybe we could just actually sort of lift and shift, and the code that one agency uses could be used by other agencies. And we built a community of practice of a couple of dozen federal agencies that are either using ServiceNow or want to use ServiceNow, and started exploring that. What we found, frankly, is it's not quite that simple for a variety of reasons, including technical aspects of different agencies' environments and the choices they've made. It's just not that easy for agencies to share snippets of code and go back and forth like that. And what we found was, instead, the way to look at this is to kind of draw back and look at guiding principles and look at the standards. So if agencies are standardizing the data, if they're standardizing the business rules and the workflows, that's almost like giving them the recipe to the workflows that they want, as opposed to being able to just share the workflows, all together. And so we started a pilot project with ServiceNow to think about how we could do a better job standardizing and sharing those things. And where we started was with the data itself, because one of the things that we found across agencies that were implementing ServiceNow is they told us, hey, when we implemented ServiceNow, we didn't find all of the data elements that we need in order to do federal HR, so we had to customize. Well, so what you end up with is a number of agencies who are all customizing ServiceNow similarly, but slightly differently, which means, ultimately they call things different names, they define things differently, and the data becomes, non-interoperable, which is what we're trying to avoid. So we started a project with ServiceNow directly to actually take our data standards, which we call the Human Capital Information Model, and to embed them into ServiceNow as a product. This is a great example of what we mean when we talk about our industry partners working to federalize their products. And I am pleased as punch to say that with the Washington release, which was released just last week, for the first time, we actually have a significant batch of those data standards embedded in the product. The core data elements associated with personnel management and things of that nature. In the fall release, the Xanadu release, we'll have another batch, those related to talent acquisition, because what we're seeing is that a lot of the agencies that are implementing ServiceNow for HR workflows are doing it around those workflows associated with recruiting, hiring, and onboarding talent. Our goal is to make it easier for agencies to deploy this and for them to do it in a standardized manner so that we can both share our knowledge and expertise and ultimately share the data that we have across the federal workforce.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the collaboration that we've seen with the community of practice has been so helpful. Just we've kind of gone back and forth and really defined what that looks like. So it's a great project to work on with you. I'll move over to Liz. So speaking of workflows, you've deployed ServiceNow to a variety of different areas, including different departments like HR, IT, facilities. Can you talk to us a little bit about the beginnings of how you got everyone to collaborate? Because I know sometimes that can be complex and difficult.
Sure. So for those of you who don't know who the Development Finance Corporation is, we are I call us small but mighty organization. When I arrived there 2.5 years ago, we were rebuilding HR, rebuilding IT. We were the Overseas Private Investment Corporation of about 198 employees. I got there in 21. We were about 350 employees, and we're now 660 employees. So what we found as people were coming in from other HR shops, and in particular myself, it was interesting because there were processes, but no processes. So maybe we did something one way 1 week, and then the following pay period, we did it another way, because this was an agency that maybe 10 years ago onboarded 20 people in an entire year, and we were now onboarding 20 people in a pay period. And as the person who was in charge of new employee orientation and who had worked with people like Bill and Don Bauer over there, I learned as an HR specialist working with these wonderful IT people that you can automate this stuff. And so when I got here, I found out that we had ServiceNow, had done some work with it, and they said, "Hey, guess what? We're going to deploy an onboarding solution." And I was like, "Oh, that's great. Who's doing that?" And they said, "We don't know." And well, you are, because that's HR. And I said, "No, it's not. Onboarding is about provisioning an employee to make sure they have a PIV card and a computer and a phone and a desk, and that's not HR." And so as I was kind of fighting this and running new employee orientation and running around in circles in the building, there's a little voice in the back of my head that reminded me of when I used to go to HR forums like this, that employee engagement starts the day a person applies to your agency. And it goes all the way through to the day they start at the agency. And as somebody who has worked at 9 different federal agencies, I know how important it is to have I've been through good onboarding experiences and I've been through bad onboarding experiences. And as the face of new employee orientation, I wanted our DFC employees to have an amazing first day. And we had all sort of the pieces in place to do that, but it was a matter of collaborating with the OIT shop and the service desk and our folks who do the PIV cards and the folks who assign offices. And so we started to come together and outline what are all those tasks that need to happen day one, or really before day one, right? Because we want people to come on board that day and have that experience. So we met with every sort of stakeholder in all of the different parts of the organization. We standardize a process. And the thing that's unique, not necessarily unique, but what we started to do too is we looked at every type of employee that we have at DFC. We have 5 different employment types. We have federal employees, we have contractors, we have personal service contractors, we have detailees, and we have unpaid interns. And what we were able to do in ServiceNow was customize an onboarding process for all of those different employment types. Not everybody needs a computer. The unpaid interns don't get a computer, right? So we were able to really get down to almost the gnat's eyelash to say that if it's this employment type, these are the tasks that are going to kick off. The other problem we were having is that there was this idea that, you know, if you were a contractor or a detailee, you could start any day you wanted. And so we worked among the team and we said, no, Mondays, maybe not the first pay period if you're of the federal pay period for contractors, but Mondays. And so now the service desk is always ready Monday morning at 8 o'clock to help people onboard. The PIV card team is there to issue the PIV. And I tell you what, if it wasn't for human beings, this thing would run super smooth. But inevitably, our humans make things complex. But we send out a notification 7 days before the person onboards to over 100 people at this 660 person organization, well, 660 federal employees, 901 total employee workforce. 100 people know this is how many people are starting next week. This is where they're going to be sitting. And we hit the ground running at 8 o'clock in the morning and people are blown away. They can't believe at the end of the day that they're fully provisioned. And I love watching their faces when they first put the PIV card in, type in the password, and their email comes up, and they have 130 emails, 20 of which are notifications from our onboarding tool that tells them this is what you need to do over the next 2 weeks. And then we reverse engineered that for our offboarding process, right? Because we had a different problem that people were leaving and people didn't know. They weren't returning laptops, to the bane of my CIO's existence over there. So now we have that tool in place as well. And the thing that I'm really the most proud of, if you've switched federal agencies, raise your hand if you have. And they hand you the piece of paper, right? And they say, fill this checklist out. And you read it and you go, but I don't get Metro subsidy. No, you have to get that signature. I didn't borrow anything from the library. Too bad, go find the library and go get that signed. We reverse engineered the process where those stakeholders get the email and it says, do they have any borrowed materials? Yes or no? No? Signed. Done. Do they park at the agency? Nope. Well, then they don't need to return a parking transponder. And so we now have such a high, I think we have a much higher level of confidence that we're getting people off of our systems. And then the facilities team, I'm kind of leaving them out of this, but they also, I think that the greatest thing that happens in the process too is that on your first day, if you're not a remote worker, you have a nameplate outside your office on your first day. And I think all of that put together just really has made that day one experience for our new employees something that they've never experienced. They can't believe, they're like, this is a federal agency? I'm like, yes, it is. So that's what we've been able to do. But it is a team effort. It's been the IT people in the back end helping me build it. It's the people on the front end embracing the process. And it's really just been an amazing accomplishment, I think, for all of us.
So how long has it been?
So we deployed June of 2022 with one person in the OIT shop. We had a new employee starting that day, so we made him the guinea pig, and then we started expanding it, and we went live with onboarding October of 2022, and from all the lessons we learned from doing onboarding, we were able to build offboarding. We started offboarding in August of 22 and fully deployed it by November of 22.
Are there other things that maybe you are looking at to continue the effectiveness as you move forward?
Yeah, I mean, we're continuously fine tuning, our onboarding form, our offboarding form. We're adding tasks. We constantly. I'm an English major, so I'm constantly tweaking the notifications. I can't help myself. If I see a typo, we got to fix it, right, Leg? So we do that. And now I'm trying to get my friends in the HR shop to embrace more workflows. So a telework form, that goes from one PDF to another PDF and then gets lost somewhere. We're working on automating or not just automating it, but building a workflow, remote work forms, and then really what I want to make sure that, because we're not doing enough of this, and my CIO over there is always asking, how many people work here? I'm getting her a dashboard. She is getting a dashboard, so she never has to IM me that question again.
You talked a little bit about forms, expanding those forms and doing those. Kind of ties back to the project that we've been working on those data elements to give you some of those fields that are now going to be necessary as you continue to expand.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. The other tie-in, I would say, so it's taking you a year and a half or 2 years to get to where you're at. But, so Liz has come and demoed the things that you've done for our community of practice. And so we've got literally a dozen agencies that are like, I want that. How do I get that? And, our goal is not to have them spend a year and a half to 2 years. Like, how do we get them to be able to deploy it in 3 months, 6 months, right? And the only way you can do that is to make sure that everybody is, using, these standards essentially. But that's where we want to get.
That sounds very powerful. So, Bill, talking a little bit about these workflow journeys, tell me a little bit about how you're looking at it at the Office of Secretary at DOC from a service management and digital experiences perspective.
So I think the key word there is a journey. So I started with commerce about 4 years ago, and our enterprise services division have moved up to the Office of Secretary at the headquarters component. When I was with enterprise services, we deployed HRSD, and we had the first instance that covered and touched every employee inside of the Department of Commerce, so about 60,000 users. We service about 22,000 of those for HR services, And what we soon started to realize is, okay, yes, we can create all these great digital journeys. Then our secretary came out inside of our mission statement and says, yes, we're going to digitize. And about that time, I started transitioning up to the office of secretary, the headquarters component. Looked at all the ServiceNow instances that were out there, as well as some of the other tech that we had. And this is kind of where the journey kind of comes in, is we realized we had a lot of technology. We were digitizing processes, but we were digitizing those processes in silos. So we were creating digital journeys, but just for HR, just for finance, acquisition, just for IT. So last year we did a great experiment. Let's consolidate one of those standalone instances into our enterprise services instance. And it worked out. We consolidated in about 3 months or so, went live. It was a lift and shift. Got great value out of that. Started looking at the data coming back, and then actually started realizing, okay, we can do more, right? And so we started this journey kind of at a grassroots level and said, hey, we can do that out of the product. We can do it pretty quickly. We can do it pretty inexpensively. Continue kind of the federated approach on that. It's just because of contracts and money, how it is right now. But now we've kind of realized, hey, it's time we can do more. We can do another consolidation. So we've got 2 more instances we're trying to consolidate. We have a goal by the end of this year to bring an integrated employee portal to the front that will have HR, IT, acquisition, and facilities. That's kind of our first phase. Let's bring that portal together, get folks to kind of come in, get these disparate experiences together. And now let's create those integrated journeys. So it's going to take time, right? We have to unwind some contracts. We got to get people to believe in it. But we've got good folks that are helping us out with that. We've got a workforce that is eager to digitize and automate. But we constantly keep going back to the guiding star of what is this experience going to look like, right? And so we're taking our time, but we have a good guidepost. And this year will be an interesting year once we kind of start bringing those disparate experiences together, putting everybody in a single framework, hopefully saving a little bit of money, creating a little bit less confusion. But then we want to kind of all tie those together in 25 and 26.
I heard you say something else in there, tying the journeys together. I think that's key, the workflows, but also data, like understanding what the data, kind of where we started with you, Steve,
Yep.
around it all kind of goes back to the data in order to make those workflows really, really flow.
Absolutely. And I think one of the nice things is our chief data officer has recognized that, right? And we have a big push when we talk about AI, right? Now when we start consolidating these platforms, we kind of know where that data is. It's really easy to bring AI into processes and all of those aspects.
Awesome. Great. I thought maybe we could open it up for any questions. If anyone in the audience had any questions for any one of our speakers. Yes, sir.
Hey, good morning to you. My name is Quentin Sledge. I'm with the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And any information side of the house, I'm the information system security officer. But I'm also the technical subject matter expert for our separating process. And you hit a nerve when you mention the separating process, because I'm always thinking of a better way for us to do our process. But the re-imaging or the rethinking of identifying that somebody may have an item or may not have an item, and how we can get that automated process checked off without the person having to look at that office. I'd like to understand how you're able to connect the returning of the item to the complete process and human resources is able to get notification in order to pay out a retirement or move the lump sum payment.
Yeah, so I would say from that standpoint, that process is a bit disparate. But again, we have the advantage of being small, so we can kind of control some of that. But basically, it's standard operating procedure for onboarding. You don't start until the security office says you've cleared security, right? That was a problem. Again, people would kind of show up, and then and so we make sure we go through that process. And then when you're leaving, our standardized operating process is that you do fill out an offboarding form. So again, everybody is notified. We did have an example actually this past week where somebody submitted that offboarding form and everybody was surprised. Nobody knew that person was leaving. Not the HR person, not the manager, but he knew that he needed to fill out that offboarding form, so that was good. So we don't interconnect all of those processes together, but people have enough information then that they can take that information and do what they need to do, right? So again, there's a task that goes out to the people who give them network access. Okay, I have to turn off their access on such and such a date. I have to collect these materials. The HR person knows that they need to, especially if it was a surprise, get on the phone with that person to say, what's your reason for leaving? I've got to fill out your SF-52 to do that personnel transaction. So I think the fact that we have these notifications works out really well. And then the one thing that we did do to kind of fine tune it a bit was if we don't get the equipment back, we put something into place to auto close the offboarding case after like 90 days. But unless the IT department has checked off that they've received the equipment, that case stays open and a report gets run every week to notify them that we're still waiting on that equipment. So that's kind of what we've been able to do from that standpoint. That's the next step. Right? So now we need to start making the decision. If you've not paid off your travel credit card bill, if you have not returned that government equipment, can we start to work together to say, don't issue the final paycheck? And I think that's a goal of ours in the next year to see if we can start to implement something like that. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have like an external, service portal type thing that the new employee has?
Not external, no. Yeah, they have to come on board to do it. We do. Is that what you said?
We need to connect you too. Sure.
I also work at a small federal agency, director of systems modernization. That's not actually what I want to talk about because in a small federal agency, we wear a lot of hats. We don't have a CDO, so I'm doing that as well. And so my question was about data. You mentioned data specifically. I'm looking to create our first data catalog, which I know is shocking. We don't have one, and the agency's been around for a long time. Is there any tools that you guys have used with better organizing your data, or can you comment on that?
I will say we're kind of new in that we actually don't have a really robust data catalog either. We do have a CDO, that is one of his goals. But I think in application development, digital services, we realized early on that we're creating the data, right? So it was natural for us to create a good partnership with our CDO, right? So through that, they've been able to help along with our CTO of going, okay, we have a lot of tech at the Department of Commerce. We're very federated. Budgets give every bureau their own IT. I think if you're at the keynote with the Air Force this morning, very much our same scenario at DOC. But what we realize now is we can start procuring at least the same technology, try to share the things that we're doing, stand up centers of engagement or centers of excellence, right? Synergize around certain technologies for certain use cases. And then that's how we're going to help our journey, right? In those areas. It's going to take years, right? And at the pace that our bureaus grow and just the nature of the Department of Commerce, we do stuff from patents all the way to NOAA. And there's different types of data, including grants management. So yeah, it is. There's no right answer, but what we did realize is it takes the team, it takes application development team, takes the data team, and then the CTO to really kind of help orchestrate this and really kind of bring people to the table and create those relationships, which will ultimately end up giving us better data, right? Because we want to change data inside of the organization.
So, which agency are you with?
I work for a small treasury bureau. We're responsible for auditing the IRS.
Ooh.
TICTA.
Nice. So you're somebody who we all want to be friends with.
Yeah.
I would say so at an agency like OPM where we have a lot of data and we have a chief data officer and so on, I would just say I think all agencies are on the same journey, and so you're not as far behind as you might think you are. At OPM, we've got a lot of work going on to standardize our own data systems, and so we've been building these catalogs and things recently as well. I would say, as it relates to whatever HR or human capital data you have, the human capital information model that we've built is a great starting point, and we can connect offline. We'd be happy to make sure that you're up to speed on that so that you can use that as opposed to having to reinvent it yourself. Yeah.
All right, well, we need to wrap this up, and I want to thank our, oh, I'm sorry, one more.
Sure. We love you, and we know the human capital business model is a great thing, but for those of you that kind of see what happens in the cybersecurity space, what has happened? We started having scorecards, and scorecards force leadership to actually make changes because we're, I'll tell them, OPM has scorecards coming on HR data. So if this is it's kind of a warning shot that says, hey, when you hear about these models, it's really a good idea to start adapting because eventually you're going to have to report, and they're going to report on your data quality, which ultimately results in how well you're aligned to that model and what you're doing.
Fair enough.
So with that said, I want to thank our speakers, Bill, Liz, Steve. If there's any other final thoughts that you want to provide for us today?
Used to have an old boss that said, "Don't automate bad processes." I say, automate a bad process, get it together. Then how else are you going to figure out how to fix it if you don't bring it together and digitize it? So go automate, go digitize, but remember, keep it simple for the folks that you need the information from. Right? Keep the experience and the journey as simple as possible for the end user, because you ultimately want them to go and do it and not have some back office staff doing it on their behalf.
Yeah, I can't say anything other than if you're living in a world of third-party spreadsheets, I feel your pain. And teaching somebody what a system of record is and its reporting tools, we're on that same journey too. So I think there's a lot to be shared, and grateful for OPM for continuing to take that lead.
Well, thank you. I would say my final word is anybody here who's working on automating HR workflows, we do have this HR workflow automation community of practice for feds, would gladly have more people in that community of practice. We also, to Don's point, there's a lot on us to helping make sure that you all understand the standards that we're writing and able to use them. So we do offer education on that, and I'm happy to connect with anybody offline to continue that process.
All right. Well, thank you, Steve. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Appreciate it, and have a good rest of your day.